Hello, everyone. I am Sacrabolic, your envoy of hope, and welcome back to Water. Konosuba movie, Legend of Crimson, is, I think, the first Konosuba movie. Honestly, I was surprised this got made, because after season 2, the director of the show said that he didn't see them getting any more Konosuba. So, movie I'm happy with. Anyway, here's the basic idea. They find out that the village that Megumin comes from is getting destroyed by the Demon King's army, and Kazuma has to have a baby with Yunyun in order to avenge the village, but then they end up going there, and the village is totally fine, and the whole thing was a prank, but coincidentally enough, it is actually being attacked by yet another one of the Demon King's generals. And so they have to basically figure out how to save the village and deal with that problem, all while, upon finding out that Kazuma is soon to be rich, Megumin's family keeps trying to set him up with her and try to get them hitched. It's all a very amusing story. A lot of Konosuba, and the difficulty with reviewing comedy shows or movies in this case is that it's just a lot of joke explaining, but there was actually a good amount of character development in it, with Yunyun learning to come into her own and accept her people, and Megumin deciding to become a more useful magic caster than just knowing one spell. There's a whole subplot about the party not really respecting Kazuma, and which is, of course, paralleled with the desire for respect and love from the General Sylvia who appears in this movie. It's all very interesting. You get to see the characters kind of come together. At the end, I can't help but feel like not much has actually changed, but it's still nice to see the characters come together and develop in that way. A very good watch, pretty funny. Yeah. Violet Evergarden, Eternity and the Auto Memory Doll is a movie that kind of feels like a Violet Evergarden episode stretched out to an hour. It's not bad by any means, but it definitely feels sort of overly long, and it's not one of their best plots. Basically, Violet has to chaperone a upcoming debutante who was I think she was a bastard that got recently legitimized, and so she's there to basically oversee the girl's training so that she can, marry into a noble family. And she was taken away from her adoptive younger sister. Violet just spends 3 months helping her out, teaching her to shape up and present herself properly in noble society. And then 3 years pass after Violet writes a letter for her for the little sister. The little sister shows up and wants to start working with Violet. Yeah, it's it's a decent episode of Violet Evergarden, basically put out to an hour, almost 2 episodes with an interlinking plot. It's interesting. There's some weird downtime in the center. It's strangely paced, but Violet's not a major focus, but it's a cute little story, and I enjoyed it. The Violet Evergarden movie is about Violet on her off day, kind of overworking herself, if we're being totally honest, getting called by a kid who's dying to write a letter for his family to receive upon his death. And then also they find the major that she's been looking for. It's a little bit about writing the letter for the sick boy, and also a lot about confronting the major and, trying to get her emotional resolution, trying to, meet up with him and close out her arc. The whole movie is very heavily dependent on sort of emotional development in conversations. I don't really feel like there's a lot of meat to dig into on this one. And honestly, it wasn't, I don't know, part of me is a little disappointed. It kind of went really cliche with meeting up with the major, but he doesn't want to see her. And then she's like, that's okay, I understand. And then, they kind of get together at the ending. It's also weirdly framed through the lens of the granddaughter of the little girl who got the letters written to her every year for 50 years on her birthday, and learning about sort of the history of Violet and how auto memory dolls were in decline thanks to the telephone. It's strangely framed. I don't dislike it. It is good. I did enjoy it, but it wasn't it wasn't particularly satisfying, and I didn't really feel like it hit those emotional gut punches that the original show did. Rascal Does Not Dream of a Dreaming Girl is the Bunny Girl Senpai sequel movie where the main character meets the girl who helped him out with, I believe, his puberty syndrome. Honestly, it's been, I think, years since I watched the first season. I kind of had to play catch up and try and remember what everything happened in it. But anyway, yeah, turns out that she has heart problems. And she is split into two versions, a future version of herself and a past version of herself. And the future version of herself has a donor heart from somebody. I won't spoil who, but it ends up creating this conflict where the main character ends up having to decide who lives and who dies, and then we go on a fun time travel journey. Once again, the Bunny Girl Senpai series kind of wears its inspirations on its sleeve here, this reminding me a lot of Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya. This movie actually has some surprisingly sad moments, but there's also some cute scenes between the main character and his girlfriend. Overall, it's a pretty good film. One side moment that I will appreciate all on its own is that at one point, the main character needs people to acknowledge his existence and no one around him can see him. And so he puts on a bunny suit and he's actually recognized by his kohai, which means that for a brief moment, the main character was the Bunny Girl Senpai. Cells at Work Common Cold Special is about a cell. I don't know what kind of cell. I think his shirt just says cell on it, but he's certainly a kind of cell who is jealous of the immune system cells, and he encounters another cell that has been infected with a virus, and they go on to just basically prank the immune system. And it gets him into a little bit of a hot water, and then at the end, the immune system kills the virus, and all is well. What I find amusing is that, especially in like modern day, it's very unlikely for someone to die to the common cold. So likening having a cold to pranking the immune system is honestly kind of an amusing comparison. I'm not sure if it's fully intentional, but it probably is. The biggest issue with this is that, honestly, it kind of drags in places and it's kind of boring. It is nice to see the characters again, and there is some nice little, like, almost like character development, character moment at very least for the leader of the killer T-cells. But it's mostly just like a short, cute episode with not too much going on in it. Eureka 7 Psalms of Planets Good Night Sleep Tight Young Lovers is an alternate universe, I think, Eureka 7 movie where it takes place on Earth and there are weird alien things that are attacking humanity. And Eureka is an artificial bio-android created by the weird alien things that are attacking humanity. And also Renten's parents were in a weird religious science cult that created an experiment that caused a bunch of children to age at an accelerated rate, and that turned out to be the crew of the Gecko, who Renten inadvertently ends up joining, not knowing that they're rebels against the military, because they want to create a Neverland, which is a world where they'll stop aging. At least I think that's what this movie is about, because to be entirely honest with you, it's kind of confusing, and they front load a lot of exposition, and they just like throw terms at you, and then they like go back to explain them. It's a lot, and I, granted, was not giving this the fullest of attention, but that is partially because it wasn't particularly interesting, and I felt like a lot of the characters weren't acting to the original like personalities they had in the original series, and I think using the same characters as the original Eureka 7 series was actually like part of the problem with this film, because it creates this disconnect where none of the characters or scenarios you're familiar with are occurring. Like, it's not like an alternate, like, timeline universe thing. Like, this has nothing to do with the original series. So it causes this, like, inherent disconnect where you're, like, naturally confused about, like, the characters and their placement in this world. It feels wrong, and I think it would have worked a lot better with a different cast of characters, like, making their own characters. And I'm not gonna lie, the story's also kind of really stupid. There's some cute romantic moments, but they're kind of few and far between. In fact, I would say Eureka being like whiny and Renten being slightly less whiny is about the only thing in common this has with the original anyway. It's just not particularly, like, interesting. It didn't really hold my attention. A lot of pretty visuals, though. Märchen Mädchen Specials is the final 2 episodes of Märchen Mädchen, which I reviewed, I think probably a few years ago, probably 2 years ago, something like that. The last 2 episodes didn't air because I think the show got canceled or something, which I'd never heard of happening to a seasonal anime before. If I remember, the plot of Märchen Mädchen was like girls who like use fairy tale powers to fight each other. But in this one, the final 2 episodes, the like main villain, I think, like suicide bombs his own daughter to unleash a monster that starts assimilating the other Mädchen girls, and it starts gaining their powers, and they like are like, well, shit, if we kill it, we're gonna kill all of our friends and like loved ones. And so they make the decision to kill it, but not before the main character comes in and saves the day with the power of friendship. It's pretty cute, but it did feel like it wasn't efficient with its usage of time. And I will say that the ending of it probably had a diminished effect as far as like an emotional reaction from me, just because it's been so long since I watched the first 10 episodes and I barely remember anything that happened. Attack on Titan Lost Girls is apparently a short OVA adaptation of a Attack on Titan light novel. It is split into 2 parts. The first part is Annie gets conned basically into searching for this lost girl for this like rich father guy because she needs someone to cover for her, because the next day she has to go and try and kidnap Eren Yeager when she fights him in the forest in like season 1, I think. In so doing, she uncovers like a murder and a conspiracy and like a whole drug trafficking ring. And then the final part of it is about Mikasa, I think, reminiscing or sort of daydreaming. I can't tell if this really happened or if this is just in her head, of like the past between her and Eren and Armin. But it's sort of shows like her early parts of her backstory when they're in prison. I think again in season 1. I don't think this is the season 3 prison. I think this is the season 1 prison. It's no secret that I'm not an Attack on Titan fan, but to be entirely honest, this is the most I've enjoyed watching Attack on Titan since season 1. I really enjoyed the like little mystery aspect in Annie's character. I actually think Annie could be added to the list of just currently 3 characters I like in Attack on Titan. We can go ahead and add in 4, just because I thought this was a nice, interesting little OVA series. Aim for the Top Gunbuster is an anime that is probably only famous because Hideaki Anno made it. It's a sort of sci-fi mech series from the 80s where Earth is being attacked by a bunch of weird space monsters that kind of look like spiders and kind of look like squids, and there's just billions and billions of them, and at one point a scientist theorizes that they act as antibodies and like humans are bacteria and they're trying to wipe us out, but there's really no evidence to support that at any point in the show other than that one scene. The basic idea is that the main character is a sort of like teenage girl who's going to piloting school, and because her dad was a pretty cool admiral guy, she ends up getting sort of special treatment and ends up getting like put into the military probably before she was actually ready by this coach guy, and gets in kind of way over her head as she tries to learn how to be a better pilot. A lot of the focus of this is sort of about the emotional journey between her and her partner is in this. She has a sort of like mech piloting partner here. And a whole bunch of it is like sort of their emotional journey, her finding out what happened to her dad, her learning to come to terms with, you know, her dad's death and the death of her other partner. She has a different partner other than the one she sticks with through most of it. And basically learning to go from like just a regular teenage girl into like a soldier willing to do what it takes. Another big aspect of this show is a major focus on time dilation. Unlike most sci-fi series, there's no real way to deal with time dilation in Gunbuster. So a big focus of this is that when the main characters go off to fight their space battles, they come back like 10 years have passed, 20 years, sometimes like even more. Like at one point, the main character comes back to Earth and like her friend from like high school is just like a mom now with like a 3-year-old kid. And then, she comes back briefly, and her friend is just an old woman. Like, it really delves into the, time dilation aspect of it. You don't really see that too often. I think this is the only thing I've seen get really into that concept. And I have to say, that aspect of it gets pretty interesting. It's very weak at the beginning. Honestly, this probably could have been bumped to an 8 if it had a stronger start. But what was here was actually pretty good, especially towards the end. Aim for the top 2. Diebuster is the Gunbuster sequel OVA that takes place 12,000 years after the ending of the original Gunbuster. It was created after Gainax lost its fucking mind, and like everything from that era, it just seems to be like a bunch of random bullshit for the sake of being quirky. The whole thing is super uninteresting. It's incredibly boring. It barely has anything to do with the original Gunbuster. Now there's just people with bullshit magic powers that the science specials try to explain, but they really don't explain. They have these dumb robots that come out of nowhere. That's not like the mechs before that were technological advancements. These are bullshit magic robots pretty much. The spider alien monsters and the bio ships have been sort of changed. They're not terrible, but there's nothing great about them either. The main character in this is just some fucking robot that we later find some bullshit out about. The dynamic between the main girls in this one is virtually non-existent compared to the first one. Usually I'm all about letting entries stand on their own, but honestly this doesn't stand alone very well either. There's nothing to latch onto. There's nothing really interesting or anything to gravitate towards. It's just a bunch of bullshit happening for the entire runtime. Kaguya-sama Love is War 2 continues the story of Kaguya-sama Love is War. In this season, there's a lot more focus on character arcs, it seems like, or I should say story arcs. A little column A, column B, if we're being honest. Instead of a storyline, being 1/3 of an episode and then getting to all 3 of them, they tend to get to more storylines stretched over longer periods of time. So there's a mini arc about Kaguya losing and breaking her cell phone, a mini arc about the student treasurer guy. There's a whole, I think, multi-episode arc about the election, and I have to say the addition of more thorough, longer-running story arcs really aids in the show's development and the characters as well. Kind of gets you more attached to the characters and what's going on in their universe, as opposed to some of just the more general, lighthearted moments of levity that the show normally has, which of course it still has in this season, but it's also able to ground itself in heavier, more serious tones. And by heavy, I just mean more serious. I don't mean that it gets depressing or anything, although it actually does get a little crazy in one of the points. So yeah, maybe it is just generally heavier. Anyway, this season was really entertaining. Thanks for watching. I have been Sacrabolic, your envoy of hope, and this has been Water. Bye-bye.